Right now on Face the State, exactly 30 days until Election Day when you choose a new governor. To help you decide, we are conducting in-depth one-on-one interviews with Ned Lamont, Bob Stefanowski, and Oz Griebel. Straight ahead this Sunday, October 7th, 2018.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dennis House. Welcome to Face the State this Columbus Day weekend. For the next 3 Sundays, including this one, we will be interviewing the candidates for governor who appeared at the big Yukon WFSB debate a couple of weeks ago. Of course, Bob Stefanowski was there, Ned Lamont, and today we're going to be talking with Oz Griebel. He is 69 years old. He's the unaffiliated candidate, the longtime CEO of the Metro Hartford Alliance, president of Bank Boston, Connecticut, and he ran for governor as a Republican in 2010. And Mr. Griebel, we thank you so much for being with us on this Sunday morning.
Pleasure to be here, Dennis. 69 years young. Just remember that.
Absolutely. You know, we heard some positive feedback about your performance in the Yukon debate, but
Sure.
The big drawback, a lot of people said to me, and perhaps you got the same reaction, was,
Right.
you know, I liked him, I thought he had some good ideas, but he can't win because he's unaffiliated, he's an independent. So how can you win?
Well, first of all, the fact that we were on the debate helped immensely, as opposed to being excluded from the prior two. Secondly, you look at the numbers, Dennis, you know them. 2.1 million registered voters in the state, almost 900,000 are registered as unaffiliated, approximately 22% as R's and 33% as D's. So to me, and that's a number that has been growing steadily, it's clear from anecdotal information, as well as polls, that the two major party candidates are not necessarily beloved by by their party followers. But most importantly, Dennis, well, the reason I decided to run as an independent in last August is I'm convinced we will win because the state is tired of partisan politics that are focused on which party's in charge, as opposed to being focused on Connecticut taxpayers, Connecticut residents, and Connecticut employers. And we hear that message consistently. We've had great feedback since the debate, great feedback since we launched our first television ad at the same time. The momentum is definitely headed in our direction. And what I'll say to people is, this is the center will hold. You know, people say that if Stefanowski wins, Trump's moving to Connecticut the next day, or if Lamont wins, the unions are taking over everything. The center and hold will hold in Connecticut. This election is about whether people want to restore Connecticut to greatness, and that's what this ticket is all about. Monty Frank and I are running not just to win, but and balance a budget, but to win, to restore Connecticut to national preeminence. That's our goal, and that's what I think people are hungry for.
Another argument I've heard is that they would like to perhaps elect someone who will have some allies in the legislature, either a Republican or
Correct.
Democrat. You don't have any allies right now.
Well, I think no, we do, and I think this is
Okay.
the point, Dennis. I think when the electorate sends us to the Capitol, it's going to send a shock to that building that it's never had before. And there are moderates in both parties that I've gotten to know over the years, and I think will be there after this election. Obviously, you've got 22 or 24 open seats, so there's going to be some new people up there. The fact that we're giving people a middle ground to come to not focus on whether they get their parking spot changed up at the Capitol or that they get their titles changed, but rather we're giving people an opportunity to come and work together, that only an independent can bring both parties together and bring the private sector in to promote our asset base and address these issues. I really do believe we have a significant group of folks up there to work with.
8 years ago, you were running as a Republican. Why did you leave the GOP?
I'd like some of these hackney phrases. I think the GOP left me. I looked hard at running as an independent in 2010. I did not believe back then that the state was ready for a genuine independent. 8 years later, the fiscal situation has worsened, and I think people are tired of the partisan politics. They go back, going back to the W. Bush era with Cheney and Rumsfeld, coming right through into the area of the we got to stop Obama no matter what happens. The McConnell phrase, the lack of ability of both parties, including the Obama administration, to bring the Republicans together. I think this has been building steadily. And in Connecticut, the inability to get a budget passed on time, the inability to really pull people together to work for the common good, I think it's a very different scene today than it was in 2010.
I want to get your take on your opponents. Why should people not vote for, let's begin with Ned Lamont. What about his plan to turn Connecticut around would be bad for our state?
Neither of these, they're not plans, Dennis. There are a lot of poll-tested verbiage that says, in the case of Ned, I'm going to return the property tax credit, which is really an income tax credit, or I'm going to bring the minimum wage up. These aren't the serious issue we're facing is a $4.6 billion operating deficit. We're looking at $80 billion of unfunded liabilities. None of these ideas have anything to do with the problems. They have things that have been tested to say, oh, this will make you sound good kind of thing.
You think these guys are just all talk?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. And I think this, they pays a lot of money to bring high-priced people into the state to help them tell them when they should show up or not show up, what they should say and when they should say it. Monty and I came together. We're not a product of a primary or a convention. We came together because our skills and our networks complement one another. And that is resonating with folks. This idea that we're being candid about the challenges we're facing, the idea that we would use the rainy day fund to begin to close that gap down, the idea that we would look at bringing the unions back to the table in 2020 with the CBAC agreement. There's a lot more specificity in what we're talking about than when you're seeing from either Stefanowski or Lamont.
There tends to be, people tend to smile when they hear their taxes are either going to go away or go down, and Bob Stefanowski is saying he's going to get rid of the income tax. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, if you believe it, I'll sell you a couple of bridges. I mean, the personal income tax in this state generates $10.5 billion, roughly, of the total revenue on a $20 billion operating base. So what are you going to do if you're going to eliminate it? In fact, the language that Bob is using now is a little different than eliminate. Now we're talking about phasing it out over several years. I think Joe Markley has obviously had some influence on him. Joe understands what that budget challenge is going to be. The idea of, I don't believe in eliminating the personal income tax at all. I believe it's a core revenue stream. I think it's equitable. It's the least regressive of all taxes, so that more people are treated fairly based on how much they earn, not because they have to go and buy something and have to pay the sales tax. To me, it's a fairy tale, and again, it's an example of something that's been poll tested. It sounds great. Who doesn't want their taxes to go away? But put it in the context of this $4.6 billion operating deficit we're looking at.
If you should win 90 days from now, you're going to have this big problem on your desk, and that's that $4.6 billion estimated deficit. Right. What is your plan to reduce it?
Well, what I've said, I started to answer that question, Dennis. It's on our website. I mean, I believe that the most important thing, the moral obligation we have as governor and lieutenant governor is to ensure that we do the least amount of damage in this first budget session. $4.6 billion is not really on a $40 billion operating budget. It's really on about $27 billion or $28 billion, because on day one, 12:01 a.m. on July 1st next year, about 40% of the budget is already allocated to debt service, pension funding, and state retiree health care. So this is a huge challenge. Our goal is not to raise any taxes, but to look at taking the rainy day fund in. It'll be, right now it's at about $1 billion. It's estimated to be at $2 billion at the end of next year. Taking that down so we can cut that $4.6 billion operating deficit down, so we reduce the amount of harm we have to do to municipalities and agencies serving the most vulnerable. We will look at things like postponing for 2 years the contributions to the state pension fund or the retiree fund, not recognizing how that exacerbates in the short term the $80 billion unfunded liability, but start bringing things to the table with the unions about how we'll shore up both of those funds by contributing to the lottery, by contributing proceeds from the sale of state property. It has to be a comprehensive plan over multiple budget cycles.
Let's talk about the unions, because both Bob Stefanowski and Ned Lamont have said that they're going to go to the unions and say there needs to be some sort of a concession or some sort of renegotiation. They don't have to do it. The union doesn't have to agree.
Well, they still don't have to do it until 2021.
Yeah.
So my point is that we start. Look, we're campaigning today to win on November 6th. The campaign to change Connecticut and start, including putting the budget together, starts on November 7th. That means we have to start getting the union leadership to the table to start looking at when the negotiations come up on base compensation and work rules. We start that discussion now. Those are the conversations that come up in 2021. And we have to bring the CBAC agreement back to the table. In fact, when Governor Malloy was advocating for the extension out to 2027, one of the things he said was that the next governor would de facto have the opportunity to bring it back because of the discussions with the union. So we have to start those discussions promptly.
What specifically about the union budget would you like to see changed?
Well, there's certain things. I think I want to go back and make sure that I'm very clear on this, Dennis. I'm not demonizing union leadership or anybody who works for the state, or for that matter, a municipality. These things were negotiated in good faith. The fiscal reality is we can't afford them. So the idea of coming back and saying, look, we will shore up these the pension fund, which is at about 30% funded and based on actuarial analysis, which is essentially bankrupt. So do we take the lottery or the sale of state proceeds, the proceeds from sale of state real estate, and contribute that? In exchange for which we'd want flexibility on work rules. Everything from the ability to privatize certain things, the idea of really moving all state employees to a defined contribution rather than a defined benefit plan. I know how hard these things are, but we have to have an honest discussion, because if we don't do certain things now in the near term, Dennis, our ability to honor these obligations over the next 15 to 20 years to retirees, I think, is a great risk.
More with Oz Griebel in just a moment, and we welcome you to watch past interviews of Face the State on our website, our app, or on YouTube. We'll be right back.